Hi everyone, my name is Daniel. I'm recording this video as part of the run-up to Belgrade Worlds, and what I'm going to be talking about is mental capacity. And what I mean by mental capacity is your ability to keep thinking when it is difficult to think. And that'll often be when you're exhausted, you've done a whole bunch of rounds in a row, you're really feeling like you've got to the end of what you can give on an answer, and how you can kind of push through that barrier and make sure you can keep thinking through issues despite your exhaustion and despite the fact you feel like you're at your end of your kind of mental tether. And for me, where this became like a kind of helpful concept in my own debating career is when I was doing a lot of online tournaments during the COVID era, often at very kind of horrible time zones. I did Korea Worlds in the London time zone despite being in New Zealand. And often when you are feeling really exhausted at the end of the day, it can feel painful to think. Very easy to kind of give up on your thinking. But what hopefully this talk will help you do is figure out how to kind of build those mental muscles and build that mental capacity so that you can keep performing at your top level for longer. So very briefly about myself, I had a very long debating career. I was one of the CAs of Vietnam Worlds. I competed at Korea Worlds and made the semi-final there. And I really love debating, and I'm really excited and quite jealous of you all in the run-up to Belgrade Worlds. You'll have a fantastic time, and hopefully this talk will help you kind of in your preparation for that. So the structure of this talk is first I'm going to talk about training and some of the training exercises I found very helpful at building my mental capacity and my ability to kind of think when it's tricky. Then I'll talk about the approach to prep tournaments and how you can use those as a really helpful launching point for testing and building your cognitive capacity. Then I'll talk about the routine that you should have before a big tournament, the kind of beginning of the day up to when you're at the tournament, how you perform through and the things you should be thinking about and taking into account to make sure you can continue to perform at your peak mentally. And then finally, a couple comments on judging, because while many of the things that I talk about in this talk are generally helpful for judging, and you know, it's a brain, you should just be treating it like any other brain and getting it into the condition you need it to be, there's some specific judging things that will also kind of be helpful to discuss. One caveat before we begin: some of the things in this talk won't work for everyone. You know, this is general advice. Brains and bodies are very unique, and if you have particular issues, you should, I encourage you to be very proactive about how you deal with it. Don't just kind of sit on it. Make sure you're reaching out to people about it, trying to talk to people. You're often there are so many people in debating who are willing to give advice and talk to you about issues that they have gone through that might be similar to the issues you've gone through, as well as kind of like the whole world on the internet, where there'll be a lot of comments, both helpful and unhelpful, that you can use in kind of formulating your own responses to things. And just to give one example, when I was kind of a younger debater, one of the issues that I really struggled with was nausea. So I got very nauseous at debating tournaments, and I really struggled to eat. And obviously, when you're not eating well at tournaments, you're feeling dizzy. You're not kind of performing at your peak, and it's very it kind of compounds and becomes more and more difficult. And one of the things that was really helpful to me in debating was having kind of coaches and people I talked to about that specific issue, so I could come up with kind of solutions to it. And essentially, I encourage you to kind of do the same thing, be very proactive and reach out to other people, because you never know who's kind of dealing with the same issues in debating and might have some helpful ideas for you. So, one other general comment before we get into the talk in general, and that's just a comment about our mindset to conditioning. And this kind of, I think, applies generally to every time you try and do something difficult as a person. It's important to have the right mindset in how you approach it. And I think what I want to impress upon you is that you should be finding a balance between being gentle with yourself, but also holding yourself to account and having high standards. And by being gentle to yourself, I mean just treating yourself with the kindness that most of you will just extend to everyone else kind of automatically, but find it difficult to extend to yourself. So make sure you're talking to yourself in a positive way. You are thinking kind of compassionately about the things that are holding you back, and making sure you're taking kind of appropriate rest and appropriate checking in, rather than just punishing yourself when things aren't going well. That's hopefully feedback you will have gotten from lots of other people. So I don't want you to overread the next bit of feedback, which I think is also important to give as kind of a corrective to the gentleness mindset, is don't be too gentle with yourself. And this is particularly true for experienced debaters. I think that, and I'm sure many experienced debaters who might be listening to this will have experienced kind of the plateau in their debating ability. They kind of get to a level and they're really struggling to take it to the level afterwards. And I think what often drives that plateau is kind of a little bit of laziness, not wanting to, not feeling like not having the right mindset to putting in that work and actually saying, okay, I actually need to be strict with myself. I need to put in the work to do it. A little bit of nihilism, so the sense that nothing matters, it's all a joke, it's just debating, like that makes it difficult to kind of focus yourself on actually doing the difficult stuff, because you might worry about coming across as someone who's trying too hard, or there's a whole range of different cultural kind of ways that this type of nihilism expresses itself, and a little bit of complacency, the idea that I'm very good already, and so I just need to keep doing what I'm doing, and I will kind of continue to grow in the same way that I have been growing, forgetting that like a lot of the growth that we've already done is picking up low-hanging fruit, and it can be quite difficult to drive up to the next level. So I think the kind of consequence of these things is that people just don't try harder, but trying harder is genuinely the way to improve. Like you should be thinking, am I trying as hard as I can? And if I want to do well at debating, I probably need to be trying harder. It genuinely works trying harder. It does make you better. Of course, you need to be thinking about burnout as well. So this is where the being gentle with yourself kind of comes in. But you don't burn yourself out from kind of doing the necessary exercise and discipline to make yourself better. And if you're doing it in the right way, it actually makes it harder to burn out. You're less likely to burn out. And so this talk will hopefully be addressed at one particular cause of burnout, one particular solution to it, and that is building your mental muscles so that you can try harder in a sustainable way. You can really cultivate your resilience when things go poorly, and still kind of step up when you're next faced with an opportunity to try harder, rather than just kind of letting that opportunity slip away. So let's get into the substance of the talk. So you are 2 months out, let's say hypothetically, from a large tournament, and this section of the talk will kind of step you through some of the things that you should be doing in that 2 months to make sure that when you arrive at that tournament, you're performing at your mental peak. So, individual training. I want to make 2 suggestions to you that I think probably made the biggest difference in my individual training, specifically in terms of building your mental capacity, but also just kind of in all the skills that are necessary to debating. So the first bit of training that I recommend to absolutely everyone is give speeches without any notes. So the kind of structure of this routine is often I will give myself 5 or 10 minutes to prep a topic that I haven't seen before. Pick an ABP or an EUDC or a tournament that you haven't gone to, and run down the motion list as kind of endless training material. Give yourself normally 5 minutes to just sit there with the topic, construct your case in your head, and construct your speech in your head. This will feel very silly for the first couple of times you do it, because you're just kind of sitting there with nothing in front of you. It just feels like you are doing nothing. But then give your speech, and you will very quickly realize the difference between I have been doing helpful things in my brain, or I have just been allowing this opportunity to kind of pass me by. And the real value of this exercise comes from the fact that when you are actually in a debating context, what you can write down is a tiny fraction of the thoughts that are necessary to give an effective speech. And so by removing the crutch of the notes altogether, you really force yourself to focus on what do I need to be holding in my subconscious and it kind of in my head to be able to then give that speech. It is things like structure, it is like point order, it is what your priorities are in your speech, it is maintaining a cohesive narrative through your speech, it is focusing on the most important bits of rebuttal to address the other person's case. And this is one of the big side benefit, it is enormous amount of mental work. So trying to hold a speech in your head and all of the responses in your head over the course of that speech stretches your brain. It is literally like going to the gym for your brain, and hopefully means that once you've done 100 of these speeches over a 2-month standpoint, when you get up to speak with notes, you suddenly are basically, you've taken taken a lot of the resistance out of it. Your brain is able to whip through these thoughts and hold things together without just relying on your notes, and that when you have the notes there in front of you, you can then dedicate a lot of that extra brain power to other things, to actually thinking through responses, thinking through the case, and it is literally just building up that mental capacity. The second bit of advice I have, and this is a really painful one specifically for the no-note speeches, is record every speech you do and listen back to every speech you do at least once. And I don't mean this in an obsessive way. You don't be beating yourself up over minor kind of speaking quirks, though for earlier debaters it is kind of helpful to hear what your mental tics are, what are the things you are saying that sound convincing and don't sound convincing. But it kind of reroutes the kind of bits of your brain that are thinking, oh, this is how this kind of inarticulately expressed or well-expressed point felt like when I was putting it together in my brain versus how it actually came out when I was speaking it. So again, it builds your mental capacity by making it really clear what were the thoughts you had during prep and the thoughts you had when you're putting together a speech, or if you're doing a speech with notes, how they were expressed on your notes versus the outcome you actually want to have. And it makes it, again, much more automatic, much more intuitive when you actually give those speeches to achieve the things that you have listened to and do find effective in your own speeches. So those are the two big exercises I'd most encourage you to adopt to build your mental strength. Okay, so prep tournaments. You will hopefully be going to at least a couple of preparation tournaments, and I encourage you don't overdo it. It is helpful to have a couple of prep tournaments, but you know, a lot of people arrive at big tournaments absolutely exhausted, and that's also not where you want to be. My advice for you here is treat it like the real thing, unless it is a tournament explicitly for fun. You know, if you're at the pop culture Grand Prix with like a couple of friends, that's different to a prep tournament, where you should be treating it as the real thing. And that's helpful both from a mental strength perspective. You know, you're actually exercising your brain in the way that it needs to be exercised, but you also form habits when you do debating. And every time you debate poorly or in a jokey way or in a lazy way, it becomes harder to break those mental habits when you are actually in the difficult situation of a tournament. The only other thing I would say about prep tournaments is make sure you're taking some time to rest immediately after the tournament. So you need to kind of decrease your stress levels again, especially if you're treating it seriously. Like, you should get quite stressed at prep tournaments. So take a little bit of time afterwards to kind of decrease your cortisol. Like take a couple of days just for like to let your brain unwind again, and then make sure you are reflecting on that tournament. What went well, what didn't go well, so that you can actually get the most out of it. Okay, so we're in the run-up to the big tournament. We're a couple weeks out. What do you need to be doing to make sure your brain is performing at its peak? The major one is rest. So do not do 200 practice debates before a big tournament. Make sure you are taking the time to rest appropriately and be very fresh going into that tournament. And I can't give you the specific facts, but I was reading an article earlier about the amount of sleep that pro athletes have. They sleep so much, and you know, I'm sorry if it's cringe to say, but you should be treating yourself like a professional athlete. You deserve that amount of consideration in your debating career as well. So give yourself the amount of time to properly rest and recharge your batteries before a tournament. Particularly when you are traveling, a big thing is figuring out how to cope with jet lag. There is so much advice online on how to cope with jet lag, and you will need to do a little bit of experimentation to find out what works for you. But you think about jet lag as a actual genuine stumbling block to performing at a tournament, and make sure you're kind of appropriately scheduling and figuring out what is my approach going to be when I arrive at this tournament, so that I'm able to be mentally fresh for round one. The last thing, and this kind of ties in with rest, is have a little bit of fun before a big tournament. It's such a wonderful opportunity to kind of hang out with your squad and see other people, especially if you're kind of traveling a decent distance. So have a bit of fun, have a little bit of unwinding, because the one thing you really don't want to do when you arrive at a big tournament is to already be wound very tightly like an elastic band ready to snap. You want to give yourself a little bit of slack so that through the tournament you have capacity to stretch both your mindset and obviously your brain, which is going through a lot of stress. So you have arrived in Belgrade, or whatever tournament this is being. Oh, this tournament is Sofia Worlds. Oh no. So I have a bit of advice for basically just each morning of the tournament. So often this can be a little bit of a dead time for people, and you know, that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's good to be resting and letting your brain kind of unwind. But I found that being a bit purposeful to the morning routine was genuinely quite helpful. And so I would advise you to do two things. The first has nothing to do with your brain at all. You should be warming up your voice a little bit. You know, some people go screaming into round 1 or screaming into round 4 without any real warming up of their voice for the day. And you'll hear those people by the end of the day. They'll kind of be like have a much more a much rougher sounding quality to their voice. And I'm speaking as someone who's lost my voice at many a tournament. So have a bit of time warming up your voice before you do anything too intense, because you really don't want to be going into it cold. Again, lots of advice online about how to get your voice at the place you need to be before giving speeches. But the second thing I do is I like to give a practice speech in the morning. I think it genuinely warms your brain up really well. And of course, some of you will be thinking, oh my god, a practice speech, that's so intense. That's like a lot of extra stuff to do in a day. But, we have been practicing our 5-minute preps and no-note speeches, which means that one of the first things I do the day before a debating tournament is I'll have done a little bit of a voice warm-up. I'll be sitting in the hotel room, set the timer for 5 minutes, and then give a 5-6 minute speech. And remember, this is not about giving a perfect speech, and this is not actually about practicing speeches. It's not about practicing speeches. It is about getting your brain moving. And there will be things that you say are inarticulate. There will be things that the points that you will make that will be a little misguided. And of course, you should still do your best. You don't want to form any negative habits. But the goal is not to give the perfect speech. The goal is to get out all of those mistakes before you get into round 1. Really start your brain moving in the morning. So find that balance between full intensity, which might lead to burnout, or super low intensity, which might mean you're not actually getting the warm-up you need. Find the balance there so that your brain has started moving already by the time you're going to the first round of the day. So while you're at the tournament, a couple of things to make sure that you're focusing on. Number one, it is one of the most important ones, but not number one just chronologically, rather than in terms of importance, is make sure you are moving. Tournaments can be very sedentary, and often they represent a big change in the movement that people have before the tournament and then going into the tournament, and that can really mess with your brain's ability to keep kind of processing information and working effectively. So, taking the opportunity to go for walks, especially when you are waiting for a result, taking the opportunity to go to socials and make sure you're having a bit of movement in the evenings. You should be having a little bit of movement in your routine. There's so much research about how making sure that you are kind of active and and moving can have amazing effects on your mood and on your brain. So try and work as much movement as you can into your days, because you otherwise can be spending a lot of time sitting and not getting the kind of exercise that either you're used to or that is ideal for functioning. And the flip side of movement is rest. So sleep is incredibly important. And as I alluded to before, I think you should go to socials. Don't send it. Make sure you're especially being kind of appropriate and mindful about how much alcohol you're drinking if you want to do well, because that obviously, debating hungover really messes up your brain. But going to socials is a wonderful way to unwind, set yourself up for kind of a good sleep, have more movement, have more socializing, all the things that are important for your brain, and making sure that your brain can kind of keep functioning. Next, make sure you have adequate food. Again, this was a huge thing for me early in my debating career. I wasn't nearly eating enough, and that made it very difficult for me to keep thinking. It made my mood really horrible. It made me tired when I should have been kind of, I was like 18. I should have been bouncing off the walls. And so bring kind of healthy snacks in and make sure you're eating. I ate so many bananas as a debater. They are the kind of perfect debating food. And if you are squad captain or coach and you're watching this is a very easy opportunity to add value to the squad. Take the time to invest in kind of a food bank that if anyone in the squad is hungry for any particular reason, or maybe missed a meal because they were getting too much feedback, or is a little bit pressed between time and was going to go get a snack but didn't have time to, you can literally hand them a banana and they can kind of keep their body nourished, and keeping their body nourished, hopefully, that will also help their brain perform. In downtime, there's so much downtime in debating, and this is one where I'm hesitant to give too much general advice, because different people have such different approaches to kind of managing that downtime effectively. For me personally, I find don't do things that are too intellectually intense, and I think maybe good for everyone, don't just read articles, like don't read like 100 economist articles between rounds, because you are generally not going to be forcing that much helpful stuff into your brain. If it helps you to unwind to read an article, you know that's always fun to do, but don't treat it as a cramming opportunity. I've seen people who scroll very happily on Instagram. I've seen people who play little bouncing ball games on their phone. I've seen people who play chess. These are all ways I think are good. Maybe don't spend too much time doing one thing. I think for me, scrolling was not a good one. I found that like being on Instagram or being on Facebook was not good for my mental unwinding, my mental rest. But you just got to find the routine that works for you, but be mindful about it, you know? Think about what has worked, what hasn't worked, what makes you feel stressed, what helps you unwind, and have a routine, I think specifically, that can be repeated if a round gets delayed. I've seen a lot of people get really derailed by kind of delays in a round starting that were unexpected. So they had the routine, they were ready to go, they'd done appropriate unwinding, and then you see them sitting there as 15 minutes gets added, 15 minutes gets added, just getting increasingly tense. So one thing that helped me was having a routine that was repeatable. And so often I think a helpful thing is like go for a little walk every 15 minutes to kind of de-stress. And if they keep kind of adding more time, be comfortable in the fact that your routine can just be extended indefinitely. I'll read a little article, I'll play a game of chess, I'll go for a walk. I'll read a little article, I'll play a bit of chess, I'll go for a walk. You know, and that kind of takes some of the sting out of that waiting. It keeps you occupied, and so you're not just sitting there, knuckles growing increasingly kind of pale as you wait for the draw to be released. Last bit of advice, really use your rest days appropriately. They should mostly be for rest and fun. Take advantage of the fact that you get to go and do fun things, sometimes outside and around the city. I remember my first kind of big international tournament was Korea Australs, and I went to the DMZ, the demilitarized zone, and then got violent food poisoning, and we got stomped in our octo-final. So, you know, don't get violent food poisoning is some advice I would give, but really use that opportunity to rest. I sometimes like to keep a little bit of rhythm, so maybe a warm-up speech, kind of keep that early morning routine, but it should be mostly about kind of unwinding and using your brain. So the goal of all of this advice is that when you are in round 8, round 9, you are really feeling burned out and like you can't think anymore, you don't succumb to that little voice in your head which just says that I just don't have an answer to this, or I can just move to the next thing, I think that is good enough. Often we are deluding ourselves when we say that, not necessarily in like a super bad way, but in a way that is not optimal. It means that you take the easy route out, and that's often where you lose important debates. So you want your brain to be able to, at the last minute of prep, if you suddenly think of a point, to be able to still have that capacity to smash out that point, to churn it out and make a huge difference in the overall scope of the debate. And you're not limited by your brain's tiredness. And of course, you will still have limits. You will still hopefully reach those limits, but what we want to do is push those limits out. A couple last comments just for judges specifically, and if you are someone who uniquely speaks, it might still be good for you to listen to this. In fact, my biggest advice for people who are developing as debaters is spend time judging and speaking. Do a little bit of one, do a little bit of the other, because it genuinely trains up like exercises your brain in a different and complementary way to doing the other activity. But here's my specific advice for judges. First thing, you will be doing a lot of judging online, when at the tournament you will be doing judging in person. Make sure that when you are judging in line, you are replicating as close to possible the in-person conditions as you can. And this means, you know, take notes on the same thing you would be taking notes on, focus in kind of the same way, hold your posture the same way if you can, just so that when you are in the in-person environment, it feels as natural as possible. Your kind of brain has all the cues that it needs. But the single biggest thing, and I think this is endemic in a way a lot of debaters won't want to admit to themselves, do not scroll on social media or any other website but the debate. It can be very hard to keep your attention on the debate with the entire world of information at your fingertips and very low accountability for, just between speeches, I'm going to check my Instagram, I'm going to scroll for Facebook. resist that urge as much as possible, because you do not do that when you are in an in-person environment, and it genuinely breaks your concentration and changes the way that you're focusing and using your time and using your brain when you are judging. So never get into that habit, because it means you don't take the things you need to out of your online training, and it means that you suddenly have random time that you don't know how to use effectively when you're in an in-person environment. To build your brain, make sure that you are tracking debates. And this is partly my feedback about scrolling. No vibes judging. Make sure that when you are actually sitting there with your notes, you are thinking through each thing people are saying and appropriately tracking it on your notes. This is not to say you should transcribe speeches. In fact, the opposite. You want to be using your brain to extract the important things out of a speech and have them recorded, so that then when you are actually judging, you can refer to your tracking in an effective way. It is genuinely very helpful when you are kind of talking to each other in deliberation, when you can point to specific parts of people's speech. You know, the beginning of their first point, when they explained this, when they added a little bit of rebuttal at the end of their third point, that I think effectively dealt with that point. That is what makes you an excellent judge. And obviously, if you're doing it consistently while you practice judging, that is building your capacity to take in this information, synthesize it, and express it. I often talk about judging as being about simplifying accurately. You have some judges who will come to a brilliant call, but that call just is everything. They basically repeat the debate to you, and they can do it beautifully and then come to a decision. But that is not actually what the art of judging is about. It's about taking something that has expressed itself over 56 minutes, or however long a BP debate is, and then express it in 7 minutes in a way that is comprehensive and convincing. And so this is a muscle you need to develop, that act of parsing through huge amounts of information, structuring it in an effective way, extracting what is necessary to come to a result, and then communicating it. Make sure that you are keeping your OAs as short as possible. Not as short as possible. You know, you should be as short as is optimal. And I think 7 minutes for a BP debate is truly optimal, because this is what trains your efficiency. It trains your ability to really make difficult decisions about what you talk about and what you don't talk about. It means that when you get to a tournament, your brain is kind of, it's all well-run pathways. Well, a lot of this talk is about making sure that you've got really well-run pathways in your brain that you can just kind of follow and roll out in an effective way. And I think this is particularly good advice, even if you are kind of doing a debate that is too complex, so a 7-minute OA doesn't capture it perfectly, because nonetheless, the exercise of trying to get it under 7 minutes, simplifying as effectively as possible, even if you don't do it perfectly, nonetheless is training those muscles and training you to do it better, even if it's not being done perfectly. So, train your efficiency as much as possible when you're giving OAs. Last little bit of feedback. This is not something that's particularly about the brain, but something I think is good to note to all judges. I think it's good to disagree productively at least once per round, because it is infinitesimally rare you will have 100% agreement. And if you do, like, sure, if you have a debate where you truly agree on anything, you know, shake each other by the hand. I've had like debates where you just like sit with the other judge and be like, oh, this was a delight, wasn't it? Like this is such a good debate to judge because we all actually had the same calls, but most of the time you don't. And BP judging has some incentives to kind of be a pushover, but it doesn't reward you in the long term. It doesn't mean you're generating you're building your capacity to disagree in productive ways, and stick to your guns when you need to stick to your guns to justify, to talk through things, because that's what makes you a good panelist, and that will make you a good judge. You know, everyone coming together with their best version of a call is what helps a panel overall to come to the best decision for the debate. So thank you everyone for listening. Good luck at Sophia Worlds. You're going to have a fantastic time. I'm really looking forward to following it. Please feel free to reach out if you have any specific questions that you did want to discuss. Otherwise, good luck. Enjoy.